Well, as it pertains to the Pac-12 media rights deal, there's only about 1,000 things we don't know. There is one thing that we do know.
Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with our beloved Conference of Champions. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch this show. We've hit 2,200 on YouTube. We got hundreds more on podcasts. Thank you so much. I'm very, very grateful that you continue to support the show. I am ungrateful in the sense that I would very much like there to be a media deal now. Many of you would probably like that as well. But you know what? As Nick Fury once said, we take the world as it is, not as we would like it to be. So this is the world that we have, where it's the middle of March. March Madness is right around the corner, and the Pac-12 is most likely going to go through a hefty majority of this tournament. I don't even know how far the teams will go. We'll talk about that later in today's show. And the discussion around those teams at some level will either be, well, they're not going to be in the Pac-12 much longer, or they don't know what their media rights situation looks like for 2024. Neither one is great. I think we all recognize that. But I was talking about this on yesterday's show. George K., our commissioner, has committed to radio silence. He's not doing interviews. His assistants, his deputies, they're not doing interviews. They're not putting out a lot of statements. You know, there was the statement of unity from the remaining 10 Pac-12 presidents. There was a comment or two from an athletic director here and there. Utah's athletic director had a snarky one shutting down the idea that they're going to the Big 12. But there hasn't been anything else, and it's been very deliberate on that front. Like, it's very, very clear. They don't care about PR. They don't care what Twitter thinks. They don't care what media people think. They don't care about people throwing jabs and taking punches and all that sort of stuff. Here's what we do now. That strategy is going to elicit a very specific result when the media deal does get announced. Whatever it is, unless it is identical to the media rights distribution payouts per school compared to the Big 12, it is either going to heighten the reactions in a positive way or a negative way. If you come in under the Big 12, it is going to exaggerate people's reactions and feelings towards the conference of negativity. All that time, and you couldn't get a deal better than the Big 12. You spent all that time and you still couldn't do this. Because we've been talking ourselves not completely in circles, but maybe a zigzag circle perhaps, right? It's like you zigzag, and then you move around, and all of a sudden, that wasn't a circle. I was trying to draw it, but I got crossed up, because I'm trying to be a weatherman essentially, which I am definitely not. We've been talking about a lot of the same things for a while. Are they going to be able to do this? What about this? How valuable is this? What about this school? What about that school? All that sort of stuff, right? Well, when you do that and you allow everybody to think about this stuff a lot and become more emotionally invested than they might otherwise have been, because it is compelling content. It's fascinating. Anytime you can reasonably speculate on something as important as this, it's going to make people feel more committed to it or more invested in it than they otherwise would be. So if you are stringing them along to this point, basically, because you're not giving them anything, you're not throwing them a bone, you're not leaking anything out. I mean, it's been amazing on that front. Like, there have been, people have said, sources say this and sources say that. Yeah, but then this source contradicts that source and whatnot. But overall, it's been very tight-lipped from the Pac-12. Very tight-lipped. And when you do that, you're going to put people in a frame of mind where they're thinking, well, you better deliver then. So then if you come in as the least valuable conference from a media rights payout standpoint, it'll be, oh man, it's as bad as we thought. But there's a flip side to that coin too. There's 100% another side of it, which is what I'm hoping, though I'm not optimistic about, George K is attempting to pull off here, which is if you then went quiet this whole time, and then you were to come in at, let's just say, $34 million per school, and you were above the Big 12 and on par directly with the ACC, which the majority of people that I've seen speculating about this stuff are not expecting. Whether that's Bob Thompson, who's talked about this stuff a lot. He's a great follow on Twitter, by the way, retired president of Fox Sports, knows a thing or two about the industry. Whether it's Dennis Dodd, whether it's John Canzano, whether it's a consortium of college football writers. They're expecting the Pac-12 to come in under. If you then go over the Big 12, George K sits there and he looks brilliant. And let me tell you, I don't expect that to happen given what the previous media rights deals were, what happened with regards to, teams moving out, and also the timeline and how long this is taking. I don't expect them to get over the Big 12. I expect them to be in that range, but my guess would be a 6-year deal that pays we'll call it $8.5 million per school per year. That'd be my official prediction. And ESPN and Amazon are the main partners. That's my formal guess. But if you come in over and you surpass expectations, then the radio silence tactic looks brilliant. Because then it's, we were all sitting here speculating about this, that, and the other thing, and you just went to work behind the scenes and got it done. I don't think that's as likely, because if you were able, but can I rule it out? Absolutely not. I don't think you can. I really don't. Rabbits get pulled out of hats all the time, metaphorically and literally. If you go to a magician's show, I live 2.5 hours from Las Vegas. There's a bunch of magicians down there. But would it be, I'm trying to think of like a percentage of what the likelihood is. But I mean, that's frankly speculative on my part. I think, Frank, it's possible, but not likely that you could get over the Big 12 if it is taking this long, unless there are just an absurd number of details to work out. Which, maybe, but whatever happens, whether it's good, whether it's bad, depending on what your expectations are, you may view good and bad differently. The reaction, because it's taking so long and because they're not, giving us anything to really go off of that's concrete, the reaction is going to be all the way over here or all the way over here. There's not going to be a lot down the middle. I'll always try and stay down the middle, though. I do my best to, but man, worked up about this stuff. A couple schools have a vested interest in the Pac-12 doing the best it can, even more than others. Kind of how you have a vested interest in checking out FanDuel, because it's America's #1 sports book. The NBA season is in full swing. Regular season winding down. March Madness is here, and FanDuel's got everything you need. You can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. Don't miss the chance with your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, question here from Travis Pennington via the YouTube comments. Great way to ask me questions. I monitor those daily. I love seeing the interaction, engagement. Some of you have some really interesting thoughts in there. Also making sure nobody's, being too harsh and whatnot. The internet's a negative place, and we don't need to contribute to that. But you guys are awesome. I absolutely love it. You can hop in there. Also hit me up on Twitter at Smalls_55 or at LO_Pac-12, and you can ask me a question via the mentions or Twitter DMs. But Travis Pennington asks, hey Spencer, as an OSU, that being Oregon State fan, the Pac-12 media deal taking longer and the news of the Pac-12 not news, falling apart becoming a more real possibility, what are the options for OSU and Wazoo for that matter? Is there only real hope that the Pac stays together, or are there other possibilities that haven't been discussed already? And if they ended up falling to the Mountain West, how devastating would it be not only for the athletics, but for the universities? So we all know I'm not in the camp that the Pac-12 is likely to fall. I've been wrong before. I don't think I am wrong here. However, let's just operate in this hypothetical landscape. I do think it's not a coincidence that Oregon State and Washington State have both had their presidents be two of the few to go on record talking about the conference and their confidence in the league's ability to get a sufficiently positive media rights deal. If further realignment happens now or in the future, there is no question in my mind Oregon State and Washington State have the most to lose because they bring the least to the table. Now, Washington State's TV viewership is better than you would think because they do tap into the Seattle market a little, but of the two Washington schools, they are valued far less than Washington. And Oregon State is valued far less than Oregon when you're talking about realignment and other conferences of a superior nature, a la the Big Ten, being interested. So I don't think that's a coincidence. However, I also think what those presidents have had to say have been mostly correct. And it doesn't surprise me. And really what they're saying is just what they are hearing, which is, yeah, it's not as gloomy of a situation as everyone thinks it is. But again, that goes back to Pac-12 just doesn't want to fight the PR battle. They just say, nope, that's okay. We're just going to keep on keeping on and whatnot. But are there other possibilities? I would not rule out the Big 12. I would not rule it out entirely. And that's probably more a long-term play. But again, hypothetically speaking, I would not rule out the Big 12 because I think in the next round of realignment, which will be, when the current media rights deals are up, 2030-ish, sometime around there, I think the Big 12 is going to go after Boise State and Fresno State. Brett Yormark has talked about wanting to have every time window. Well, from a TV viewership standpoint, Oregon State, Washington State, especially Wazoo, are more valuable than Boise State or Fresno State, who also can provide value. But the Big 12 has a clause in their contract with ESPN that if they add other Power 5 schools, the media rights distribution payouts remain the same because it's not that much. Like of the 4 media rights deals we have so far, the Big 12's is the lowest. But ESPN says if you're adding Power 5s, you're going to be able to keep the payouts even, and those schools would be able to be added as full members. I believe that's my understanding of what that is. So if you're the Big 12 and you want to look west, if things were to go the way that I don't think they will, and I certainly don't want them to, in the Pac-12 in 10 years, let's say, were to just cease to exist, right? The Bay Area schools, Oregon, Washington, go to the Big 10. The Four Corner schools decide Big 12. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Oregon State and Washington State could get into the Big 12. They could be, I think, somewhat cultural fits. I think Washington State especially. I think both schools, honestly, kind of have, they feel like Iowa State. They have to do more with less. They're the number 2 program in their state from a football standpoint. They're not the flagship schools of their state. I think they kind of feel like Iowa State. So I wouldn't say it's impossible, but would it be more likely they'd end up in the Mountain West? Probably. It would really depend on what the other schools actually ended up doing. What if, again, let's just say it's 10, 15 years down the line. What if Utah and Colorado go to the Big 10 and then the Arizona schools go to the SEC? Well, then the Big 12 would probably consider it more likely of an option, right? But I think it depends, and this is why Oregon State, Washington State would like the conference to stay together more than most. Their fate is not entirely in their own hands, right? And no one's fully is, but more than most, the future of their football teams and programs and their men's basketball and their women's basketball teams and their universities in general are really contingent upon the Pac staying together. That's the best option for Oregon State, Washington State. How devastating would it be for the athletics and the universities? I mean, I don't know if I can think of a realignment move where a team has actually gone to an inferior conference like that from P5 to G5. I can't think of one. So if that ended up being the only option that remained, the amount of money coming in your athletic department, it plummets. The Mountain West media rights payout, I think, are like somewhere in the $6 to $8 million a year range. It's pennies compared to what you could get even in the Pac-12. It's why any Mountain West school like San Diego State will be very happy to take a 50% rate for a period of time, because that's still more than what you're getting in the Mountain West. So, yeah, I think that those two schools, more than most, would like the Pac to stay together. But I'm in the camp with them. I would like the Pac to stay together. Paul Littman chimes in. Thanks for taking the time to reply. Always, man. Appreciate you. If there was a rough framework done, why wouldn't the Pac leak it? Why keep the uncertainty, ridicule, doubt, speculation, and vulnerability going? I got to tell you, that cadre of vocabulary words, elite. Uncertainty, ridicule, doubt, speculation, vulnerability. That's a nice stretch right there, Paul. I appreciate that. What does the Pac gain keeping a rough deal under the wraps or rough draft? The Pac is a very proud, and he puts in parentheses, arrogant conference. That's not entirely wrong, I don't think. Kind of depends. I mean, you got egos at every major Power 5 university in the country. That's just can come with the territory. Some AD or president or assistant would let it slip. There isn't a deal yet because the only deals being offered are either for less money than the Big 12 on linear networks or equal or more with mostly streaming. So I think the advantage to not letting it leak is what I discussed at the beginning of the show. If you are able to put together a deal that involves ESPN, has a streaming partner, and is either right underneath or even just slightly above the Big 12, if you're able to put that together, then having gone quiet all this time and letting everything be negative, it would be kind of a mic drop moment for the conference to be able to say, here's what you thought about us, and here's what we were actually able to do tangibly in the real world, not the speculative one. So I think that's their advantage. I think potentially, right? I mean, that's all potential. I think it's more likely that they don't have a deal announced yet because they aren't going to be able to get to the numbers that they would like to, or at least they're not right now, and they're potentially looking for new partners. But the other thing, and I've mentioned this a couple times, but it bears repeating, there might just be a lot of details to work out. Because if they're adding 2 new schools, and if a streaming partner is heavily involved, like Amazon or Apple, that's unprecedented, right? The Big 12 was able to do its deal really, really quickly because they, announced their schools quicker than the Pac-12 did, the new schools, right? Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and BYU to replace Texas and Oklahoma, which is obviously not as valuable, but still gives them the teams, gives them the inventory, gives them some reach across the country and whatnot. But the Big 12 basically re-upped their current deal, but just changed the dollar figures, but everything else stayed the same. And so I continue to wonder, absolutely, if it's taking this long because they're not even close to a number that they're comfortable with on a per-school distribution basis. But I also wonder if Amazon is heavily involved, if there aren't a bunch of logistics and details and crossing T's and dotting I's behind the scenes that go on with something like that, that's causing this to be a holdup, in addition to adding new schools. That's the only other thing I can come up with as to why. I think it's more likely for sure that they're just not going to be able to get to where they would like to, which would, obviously they want to be above the Big 12, but at least be within striking distance there. But why wouldn't they leak it? Because there might not be anything to leak. I mean, that's the other possibility. Remember what I said on yesterday's show. Remember this. I said on yesterday's show, in my first segment, that I don't think there's a timeline here. So maybe they're just trying to finish the details and they run a tight ship and they don't allow leaks. Maybe. But maybe they're not even that close to a deal, but right now they don't care because they feel like they could get one, but they're just fully exploring the market and going to every nook and cranny of the media rights department in the entire country to see where they could get the best possible deal. Because, as I said yesterday, they're past the point of no return from a PR standpoint. You know, it's like he's already on the ground. You knocked him out in the prize fight. Okay, great. Pac-12 is clearly okay with that and confident in their ability to bounce back up and get him in the next round. So both could be those, but both could be options. But man, that's a valid question. I think it's a valid point to make, Paul. I think that's a valid point to make. I think on the leaks front, conferences, governments, politicians, whoever, universities, they don't want stuff to leak for a reason because they want to control the narrative. But the interesting thing is the Pac-12 is letting everybody else control the narrative. So those two things are kind of working in contrast to one another in an interesting facet. That's a very interesting thought. I like that question. Good one there from Paul. All right, March Madness. We are going to discuss the madness now. Pac-12 got 4 teams in. I like that. There was a time where it looked like it could be 2. Looking at 4. USC, UCLA, Arizona, Arizona State. Everybody down south. Everybody up north got adjustments to make. I'll start with the 2 lowest seeded teams. Arizona State is playing a first 4-in game against Nevada. They've got a former Pac-12 player over there in Jared Lucas who can light it up. Former Oregon State Beaver, gone to the Wolfpack. They were the last team into the tournament, Nevada. And ASU, obviously one of the last 4 in. And if they win that game, they'd go up against 6 seed TCU. I don't think ASU can get past the second round. I don't think they're a second weekend team. But I probably would have said the same thing about an 11 seed play-in team UCLA with Johnny Juzang, Jaime Jaquez, and Tiger Campbell that went to the Final Four. It's March, anything could happen. But the problem is that TCU team is underseeded. As in, they should be a 4 or a 3, and instead they are a 6. Their ceiling, maybe not a 3, they've got 11 losses. They should be a 4 or a 5, probably a 4. They have got some high-level wins. I've watched them play a decent amount this year. TCU's good. TCU is good. I think that's a tough draw for Arizona State. I would have rather played a Kentucky or an Iowa State. I would not have wanted to play Creighton, though. Those are the other 6 seeds. But I think that's a tough draw to get TCU there because I think that's a dangerous Horned Frogs team that I might very well be picking to upset Gonzaga in the second round. So I don't expect that much from Arizona State. Now, I don't think USC can make a deep run here, but I got to tell you, I love them in that first game against Michigan State because March Madness is about guard play, and Boogie Ellis is on fire. Drew Peterson, nice player. Ichukwu in there. I like USC against Michigan State. I'm picking that all the way. I am tempted to take USC to the Sweet 16. I am very tempted. I don't think I'm going to, but I tell you what, I would not rule that out whatsoever. I don't think they're an Elite 8 caliber team, but USC, I think their ceiling's a Sweet 16. It's a decent but not great Michigan State team. They've been up and down this year. The 7 seed they're going up against. I love the Trojans there. I really do. That is one of my favorite first-round picks. My upset of the first round is 13th seeded Louisiana over Tennessee. Yeah, I'm riding that all the way. I also think Purdue loses in the second round. The other 2 teams, UCLA, Arizona. UCLA's got the better draw here. UCLA's got the better draw. It's a good but not great Gonzaga team as the 3 seed. They've got UConn at the top of the bracket who have to go through Kansas. And Kansas has got the unfortunate issue of Bill Self's health kind of hanging over the program. And that sucks. And I hate that. But you have to factor it in when considering who might make a run in March Madness. You have to have everything going your way. Guys got to be hot. Guys got to be healthy. And UCLA's missing a player, but they still have a bunch of really good ones. I am always concerned about anything outside of basketball that a program may having to be dealing with, as Kansas has with their head coach being in and out, given his health problems. Glad he's okay. He's planning to coach the tournament. But, I mean, what if he suffers a setback and has to go back to the hospital? Is Kansas as scary? I'd argue no, because Bill Self is one heck of a coach. So I look at that, and the 5 seed St. Mary's, like, they're not making a run. That's just – I mean, I love St. Mary's. I am a WCC school grad. I went to Santa Clara. But I respect the hell out of St. Mary's. They're not winning more than one game, and I'm actually going to pick them to lose in the first round of VCU. That's one of my 12-5 upsets this year. So UCLA's got the better draw. I also think that they're better. They're the better team than Arizona. I know Arizona beat them in the tournament title game, but Arizona's got a much tougher path. And, I mean, it's not close. In the second round, Arizona will play either Missouri or Utah State. Not actually that worried about that. I think the Wildcats are a Sweet 16 team. But then you could be playing Baylor or you could be playing Creighton. That is so much tougher than TCU or Gonzaga. I think that's tremendously tougher. And then the 1 seed in your region, Kansas, a repeat national champion. When you win a national championship, it's hard to go back to back. It's hard to even go far in the tournament after winning the whole thing. And though I think this Kansas team is really good and maybe a slight exception to that general rule that we've seen, I'd watch out for Arkansas in the second round coming through. Eric Musselman, heck of a coach, got to the Elite Eight last year with the Razorbacks. They're not quite as good. They lost Jalen Williams to the NBA. Not Santa Clara's Jalen Williams, who is a stud, and they're in the same team. But I would watch out for that. And I think that's more likely than a Maryland or a West Virginia beating Alabama. I think Alabama's tremendously talented. And, yeah, they've got a little outside noise to deal with too, but I don't think it's as severe at this point compared to a Bill Self health question mark, right, which is a very legitimate question. But you look at the top seeds, San Diego State's probably one of the weaker 5s. If you're Arizona, think about who you could play down the line. But, man, I think Bama, Baylor, Creighton is a lot tougher than Kansas, Gonzaga, TCU, and St. Mary's. I think that's and by the way, Virginia is in Arizona's is in the South region as well as the 4 seed. So I think Arizona gets the Sweet 16. I think UCLA does as well. I'm probably going to pick UCLA to the Elite Eight. I don't know if Arizona gets past the Sweet 16. I think that's where their season probably comes to a close. Can't wait for March Madness, though, as always. Appreciate everyone listening. Thank you so much for doing so. Have a wonderful rest of your day.